General Welsh, as you might expect, my comments or questions today will deal largely with Eielson and the role that future OCONUS basing of the F-35 might play in Eielson's future. For the benefit of my colleagues here on the subcommittee, back in February of 2012, General Welsh's predecessor announced that the Air Force planned to transfer an F-16 squadron from Eielson down to Elmendorf Air Force Base. It would downsize Eielson by the order of about two-thirds of its active duty personnel, and all done by 2015. The Air Force has informed us that they intend to make a decision this fall following completion of an EIS and a strategic analysis. This would have a devastating impact on the economy of the Fairbanks and the interior region. The direct and indirect job loss is estimated at about over 3,000 individuals. Unemployment would rise from where we are now at 6.2% to an unacceptable level of 8.9%. Lay off teachers, close schools, a tough situation. Of course, we're not in a BRAC environment. I have described this as a backdoor BRAC, and it probably comes as no surprise that I, along with the other members of the Alaska delegation, have requested that the Air Force be prohibited from implementing its proposal for Eielson in 2014. Back in 2008, the Air Force announced to the Fairbanks community in writing the start of an environmental scoping process for possible basing of the F-35 there at Eielson. And then in 2009, we came to learn that the scoping process never occurred, but we were promised at that time that Eielson was either at or near the top of the list of possible OCONUS basing of the F-35. So that we were then told that there was going to be an announcement that would be made shortly on OCONUS basis. That never came. Can you tell me, General Welsh, what thoughts, if any, the Air Force has on the desirability of Eielson as an F-35 basing location? What kind of time frame you're looking at for OCONUS F-35 basing, and then also whether or not the Air Force's immediate decision on downsizing Eielson will be affected by possible F-35 basing at some point in the future?
Yes, Senator. The Secretary and I just reviewed earlier this week the proposed criteria for our overseas CONUS selection process, overseas CONUS-based selection process for the F-35. There's a little more work to be done on that to make sure we have the criteria firmly established and clearly coordinated with U.S. Pacific Command, U.S. European Command, and PACAF and USAFE. That process is ongoing. I would suspect by the end of this month those criteria will be firmly established, and we'll start to evaluate all of the potential bases in both overseas, both Europe and the Pacific. In the Pacific, Eielson is one of the bases. As you know, Alaska, it will be part of the Pacific basing for overseas basing for the Pacific. Eielson is one of the bases on the list to be examined. And so we will take a look at every base relative to these criteria, and sometime this fall, my guess is late October, we will produce a preferred and a reasonable alternative listing that'll be fully briefed to the Congress. I'll tell you this, Senator, I'm looking forward to my visit to Eielson here in about a month or month and a half to meet with the community there and hear their concerns directly. And as you mentioned, we are completing the EIS, and we are still on the same timeline to make a recommendation to the Secretary this fall.
Let me ask then about the EIS, some of the particular criticism that I have heard, which you should be prepared for when you go up north. I understand that Air Force is simultaneously proceeding to complete the EIS and the strategic analysis. The public will have an opportunity, apparently, to comment on the EIS draft, but not on the strategic analysis. And I'm not quite sure why it's set up that way. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. An EIS is designed to inform the decision makers on the range of alternatives to proposed actions. So it seems logical to me that you would have the strategic analysis precede the EIS and then inform from there. So I guess the question to you would be whether or not you could leave this draft EIS comment period open until the strategic analysis is done, and also to invite comments then on the strategic analysis as well, whether or not you would consider that.
Senator, the path ahead that the Secretary laid out for us was for us to take a look at the EIS. The strategic analysis, I believe you're referring to, is the one that will be conducted by the Pacific Air Force's Commander General Carlisle and his team. And when he's completed that analysis, and it's an operational analysis, it's an assessment of the inputs from the EIS, it's a look at costing, it's a look at all the things that you and I both hope are in the discussion, and then he will come forward to the Secretary with a recommendation. I'm not sure keeping that available for public comment as he completes his recommendation would be helpful to his process. I think public comment's been pretty clear in the EIS, and that's going to be factored in to everything he says. You, of course, will see the results of any analysis he does.
And I just might add that the concerns that I'm hearing from those who weighed in and gave that public comment is that they don't feel that they have been heard on it. So it will be something that you will hear when you go up north. So it may be something that you and your folks might want to give a little, an extra look at, and I would appreciate that.
Thank you,
Look
Senator.
forward to your visit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.